All right. Decision making. All right. Hi, I'm Dr. Haniyeh Yousofpour, and today I want to talk about bias in decision making. Decision making is the cognitive process of selecting among a few choices. We have to make a decision when there's a problem or when there are multiple paths available to us. When we make a decision, first, we have inputs. This is the type of information that is available to us, and our brain picks up on some information. And we're going to talk about what type of information our brain will pick up. Then our brain will process the information that is available to us. And after processing, we will have an output. And that is the decision. It is committing to a path. Now, every controlled behavior starts with a decision. And that's why it is very important to understand how our brain makes different decisions. When the information comes in, at the time of decision input, there are different bias that can impact what kind of information we take in. The first one is confirmation bias. What confirmation bias is our brain shortcut to sort through all the information and only pick up information that already exists in our brain. If you believe that a product is not good and you are reading all the reviews about that product, because your mind is set that this product is not good, your brain is going to sort through all the reviews and only pick up the ones that will verify this product is not good. And it will ignore all the positive comments about that product. The second factor about what information we take in is the look and feel of the information. If you walk into a room, you are more likely to remember things that are bigger or bolder. So in a classroom, when a professor is teaching, it is common for them to remember those who speak more and are louder. Because in their interaction with all the students, the ones that are more visible are more likely to be remembered after. Because our brain likes shortcuts. And if something is right in front of it, it's going to pick it up. The other factor about what information we take in is about the receiver of information, the character of that person and their mood. So if I am looking at information, depending on my past experiences, the familiarity of subjects, or what I am thinking, I'm going to pick up different type of information. So for instance, if you go into a gathering and there are multiple people there, and later on someone asks you who was there, you're more likely to recall individuals that you knew from before. Because they were more familiar, your brain picked up those people because it was just easier to remember. The reason it's important to understand the bias you may have at the time you intake information is because there is so much information out there that may be relevant, but you ignore because of the limitations your brain have. Now, the question is, how do we get over this? How can you train your brain to take in all the relevant information? So the first thing is to become aware of the bias you may have. So with the 3 categories that I shared with you, next time you are looking at information, you can pause and validate the process of taking information in. If you have had an argument with someone and they send you an email, going back to confirmation bias, you may read their email, ignore any positive comments they have, and only remember the negative ones, and even the tone that you will use to read the email is going to be based on how you feel about that person and that interaction. An easy way to overcome that is to find a neutral party to read that email for you so that they can validate if the information you're picking up is in fact the right information. Often, we ignore many pieces of information that are relevant because it does not confirm what we already believe. Number one is awareness. When you are aware of your potential bias, then you can find ways to overcome it and neutralize that bias. The second one is repetition. Repetition will create a better understanding of information that's available. If you read the email multiple times, you are more likely to pick up information that you did not pick up the first time. If you go back to think about the party you were at and try to repeat going around and looking at more people, you're more likely to remember. And third is visualization. When you are thinking about information that was available to you, if you visualize that process, what you were hearing, what you were seeing, and take your mind back to that moment, you are more likely to pick up information. So even if you read the email, if you're thinking about it, you visualize the email and what was written, you're more likely to remember more relevant information than the first time. The second part of thinking that bias may happen is when you are processing information. So when you process information, depending on the time of information becoming available to you, depending on the characteristic of the information, your brain again may have a shortcut and remember part of the information to process. The first thing that I want to talk about is timing of your exposure to information. If you have access to information for the first time, that is primacy bias. Throughout this bias, you're more likely to remember your first interaction with the information. For instance, if you travel to a new city that you've never been to before, and your host is very kind and welcoming and supportive and show you important parts of the city and talk positively about the city, because your first interaction with the city was positive, you're more likely to think of that city as a great city. That is primacy bias. The other side of that is recency bias. Recency bias is when you remember information that you received last and put more value and weight on that information. If you have an employee that works for you and they have been great for the entire year, their performance was wonderful, they contributed, and then in the last month, they make a significant mistake. And when you are meeting with them at the end of the year to give them their annual review, recency bias can kick in if you only focus on the last month because that's most recent and the last piece of information that you have available about the performance. To neutralize this bias, it's important to take notes. It's important to capture the information, and when it comes time to process the information, to make a judgment for you to review all the information so that you can have a balanced processing. In the case of performance appraisal, it's important to capture the person's achievements throughout the year and not just rely on your memory in the last month to appraise their performance. The second common bias in processing information is halo or horn effect. And halo and horn effect kick in when you judge a situation based on one characteristic. The halo effect could be if you are interacting with someone who is very nice and they are smiling all the time. Because your interaction with them is pleasant, you may assume that they are a trustworthy person, that they are a high performer, that they are a great citizen. So you make all of this assumption because their interaction with you was pleasant. The other side of that is horn effect. Let's say you go to a restaurant, and when you sit at your table, there is a stain on the glass that's on the table. And at that moment, you take that characteristic, and even if the service is great, the food is great, you're not going to remember anything else, and you're going to make your judgment based on that stained glass. That's horn effect. When we take one piece of information, if positive, halo, and if negative, horn, to make judgments, and ignoring all other information that may be available to us. This can cause you to make a misjudgment. So to neutralize this, you want to ask yourself, is my judgment based on all the information that's available to me? And you can list the characteristics related to that situation in order to make a better judgment. So if you've gone to a restaurant and you want to go online and write a review for them, you want to pause and say, okay, let me go throughout the entire experience. How was I greeted? What was the service like? How was the food like? And then when you put everything together and look at it, you will have a better chance of having a balanced judgment. The third bias that I want to cover today, which can impact your decision-making process, is contrast effect. When you compare two situations and you make judgment about the second situation based on the first one. For instance, if you're going to buy a house and your real estate agent takes you to a house that is not well maintained, it's not in a good neighborhood, all the amenities are broken, and you just walk out and say, oh my God, what a horrible case. And then right after, you see an average house, the one that's in an average neighborhood, and it is well maintained, but it's not the best shape. And when you look at it, you compare it to the first experience, and all of a sudden, you see this house much better than it actually is. The way that you can validate if contrast effect is happening is to ask yourself, if you saw the second house first, would you assess it in the same level as you did because now you saw it after that horrible house? Instead of looking at something objectively, we're comparing it to other situation. This can also happen in our personal lives, where you may be happy with the life that you have, but if you start comparing it to others around you, then it may impact your judgments. The best way to make unbiased decisions is to become conscious of it. We are biased beings, and our brain has shortcuts which are necessary to survive. But when you think about potential bias at the time of intaking information, then you can pause and validate the information you took in and the way that you process information. So being conscious of the potential bias will already help you to make better decisions. And when we get to the output of a decision, the way that we communicate information is very important. So there is something called affinity bias. An affinity bias is that when we are sharing information, we are very biased. We put more value on our personal impact on a situation when it's positive, and more value on external factors when the outcome is negative. Now, the interesting part is that we do the opposite for other people. For others, we put more emphasis on their role when the outcome is negative, and less emphasis on their role when the outcome is positive. An example would be if you write an exam and you walk out of the exam. If you have got 90%, you say, I got 90%. But if you have got 60%, you say, oh, they gave me 60%. If you are stopped by the police, you say, they stopped me for speeding. But if somebody else has been stopped by the police, you say, they were speeding. And the way that we communicate information is biased. The other bias that we may have when we are communicating information after we've made a judgment is that we may add more information to sell our idea and kind of ignore relevant information. So by being too focused, the way that we frame information is going to impact how it's going to be received by others. If you're looking at a problem and you have a solution that may work 50%, if you say there's a 50% chance for this to fail versus saying there's a 50% chance for this to work, even though they both are saying the same thing, the way that they're framed are going to have an impact on how the information is received. Lastly, the way that we communicate and the words that we use are very biased. When you are sharing information about something that you like, you're going to upsell it. And when you don't like the situation, you're going to downsell it. So you want to be mindful of how you're communicating the outcome of your decision. These are just a few biases that exist in our decision-making process, from input to process to output. If you like this content, please like the video and leave a comment if you're interested to learn more about decision-making process, and subscribe for the future videos.